All right, welcome and hello everyone to Pens and Pixels' first online portfolio review. For our first episode, we're going to be covering about 5 different portfolios of each submitted artwork. So I would like to introduce myself. My name is Mike Kent. I'm the chair of Pens and Pixels, and I'm also an instructor at Algonquin College in the Concept Art Foundations program. And I am joined by my co-critiquer, Tara Phillips.
Hi, I'm Tara Phillips. I am an art director at Snowden Studios, which is an independent game studio in Ottawa. I am also an instructor as well as a freelance illustrator and graphic designer. So something that people ask a lot is, how do I get my portfolio reviewed in a really positive way? How do I get the kinds of jobs that I'm looking for with my portfolio? How do I make my portfolio speak for me? So this is something that we want to kind of address in a very sort of formulated way, where we want to look at the general feel of the portfolio and our initial responses. So what is it that I see first thing that I look at it? Does it invite me? Does it make me want to keep looking at the work? And then we're going to kind of narrow it down a little bit and talk about some specific pieces and sort of if it's a strong or if it's a strength or a weakness to your overall portfolio. So
yeah, I think the big goal is to tackle a lot of this from a professional perspective, rather than just a critique on your skills or just on how strong you are with any particular work. A lot of people are looking to try and do this as a job, and it's very hard to understand, can you make this into a profession for yourself? What am I doing incorrect? What was the way I was supposed to do it? When you're just starting out, or even later on and trying to figure out how to make yourself more successful. So we want to try and give that perspective, a professional perspective on what your portfolio is doing for you. We would like to say in the very first that we apologize if we make a mistake with anyone's name or anything else.
We're not professional name pronouncers.
No. And we're also incredibly North American English. All right, so our first portfolio review is Carlos Vilas. And there we go. Okay. So we want to talk about his portfolio first, and then move on to the pieces after, right?
Yeah. So we'll do kind of just a general impressions review.
All right. So do you want me to kick it off, or?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So first, with Carlos's portfolio, I find a lot of his work is very strong and has a great understanding of value and lighting and form. Strikes right away with that, and really do like his use of texture. But I would say that my first impression upon hitting the website is way too much. There's a lot going on here. Like, it's strong work, but it's so much and it's so strong.
I think also maybe his work would really benefit from a format that's more like a thumbnail, like a smaller, like a closer crop thumbnail, just because his pieces are so detailed and there's so much going on that it might really benefit to crop things down a lot closer as more of a tease.
I'm a big fan of ArtStation as a tool in itself for like networking and seeing other artists, but using it as your primary tool for your portfolio, I think actually strikes off as a weakness, just because it's far more professional to have a website that's named after yourself. I mean, if you're struggling for money or you don't know how to do that, there are a lot of services out there. Squarespace is a good one. Behance is a great one with their pro sites. Then there's lots of tutorials out there. You really should try and make this into something very personal, because if you just hand off a Behance site that's not the pro site, or just an ArtStation, you do look more unprofessional no matter how good your work is when you hand that off to an industry professional. They're going to look for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for a professional who's trying to decide whether or not they're going to be employing you, for any employer that's looking at your work, they're going to get overwhelmed really early, right? Like, you have strong stuff, but they're going to see all of this and they're not even going to know where to click. And they're going to just not even be willing to scroll to the bottom. They're just going to be like, dude, so much.
Yeah.
And it could be that you have amazing pieces in here that could earn you that job, but they're never going to take the chance to look, because they're just going to be like, oh, all right.
Yeah, and another thing about the ArtStation site is that you can't give yourself headers or to divide up your work in any way. So you would really benefit from kind of dividing your work up a bit, having something that's sort of maybe more focused on like monsters and that kind of thing, and like character art, and then stuff where you're sort of showing off more of a like a poster sort of layout. Kind of split things up a little bit. And something else that's really missing here is process.
Yes.
Process is, and we're probably going to say this about a million times.
A million times more.
Yeah. But process is key. If I'm looking for somebody who I can trust to go about the sort of creative process, concepting out different ideas, that they're flexible to try new things and push things in different directions. If this is all I'm seeing is just all final art, I get a little bit wary of what your process is like, and if you're even able to kind of go through that iteration process. So it's really a great idea to have kind of a little section of your portfolio. It doesn't have to be a million pieces or anything like that, but just a few strong images that sort of show your process and the way that you think.
Yeah, for sure. Breakdown and ideation is key, especially if you're looking to be a concept artist, which I know you are. And if you're going to be doing a concept art job, the idea is concept, right? Like you're exploring ideas and ideation. As a matter of fact, the best skill they want from a concept artist is the ideas over the execution. People can learn to draw over time and they can get better with more experience, but do you have really good ideas? Do you know how to show off really good ideas? Do you know how to work within being critiqued and directed over and over again until the work morphs into something new as you work with other people and you work with your creative director? And that skill is the number one skill they're looking for. It's the most desired skill from us having concept art in the industry today, is to have that ability to think and to create and have ideas and to show it off. Because we're starving more and more for more ideas. And are you showing that in your work? A bit. You're showing your creativity for sure. There's some great work here, and I really like the werewolf piece, and I really like your zombie piece, and that's great. But how did you get there? And that's the most important thing to show every single time. It doesn't have to be the main thing. It just take those images, and you can even do that within ArtStation, and just show the process either underneath or above or whatever. Just plan it out. Show how you got there. It's so important. All right. So our next portfolio coming up is, we apologize if we're pronouncing your name wrong, Jithan Rhoda. So yeah, this is another strong set of work, and I really do like the website. I like that it's simple. I like that it has your name in the title. It's yourname.com. I mean, sometimes that doesn't work out for everyone. Some of us have more common names, like myself.
Yeah, me too.
And you can't get it, so you can make variations of that, like art.com or .ca or, find.net. It's fine. But it is just a self-identified website, which is great. It immediately sends a good note, sends a professional note, sends you spend some time, working on this as a personal project that you're going to present to someone. I do also kind of like the layout and the fact that it's a little bit basic, but I would like to see some more pop. Your banner at the top, like you have this small little image, which I think could be done more with some more fun graphics, because it is kind of cute and neat. But I think that could be expanded upon in some fashion. Or more so would be to even just pop up the title at the top and make that a much larger font and a much more bold font and avoid the grays.
Yeah, I think, I don't know that I fully agree with you.
It's okay.
Making it more...
You can disagree.
Making it more busy. I would actually just like that little secondary line under the header, just move it up and center that icon sort of shape in the center of that, and then your work, is moved up, and that is still the focal point. If you want to, it probably wouldn't hurt to have the title in there, as opposed to up in the top, but that doesn't actually really bother me that much. What bothers me more, this is just like a graphic designy thing, is like, you have 4 things and it's
one,
3 on one row and 1 on the second row, and that's a big no-no.
Yeah, it's driving me nuts too.
Yeah.
Make it a column of 4, or even make it 2 on 2 if you don't have more sections, or make more sections. To try and even it out. You don't have to worry about how much content you have in each one.
Put a section for process work.
Yeah. That's a great section.
Yeah.
And I mean, your name would be nice on the actual page, because when I open it up, I'm confused by what this banner is. It's so large, and I mean, white space is awesome, and we should all learn how to use it properly. But Tara's right, you should be moving it up. You should be trying to make it a little bit more condensed and a little bit more clear. You should have your name in there. Concept artist and illustrator is tiny, tiny, tiny. Some employers are older and need glasses and can't see, so, you should try and make it as clear as possible. Other than that, I mean, I really do actually like the idea for the construction of the website. I would just say it's literally just pushing some stuff around and it would turn out great. As for the actual displaying of the content, again, done quite well, but there are a few issues I would hit with your actual content. And starting with in your creatures section, you start off with your first tab in your creatures section with these very highly detailed, very beautifully done pieces, which look, and I could be wrong, but they do look like they've been done on top of a ZBrush model or some sort of render beforehand, and then you've done on top, which is a completely acceptable method. Yeah. And they come out really well, and they're nice, and there's great ideas. I love the wolf dog, or I don't even know what that is, a lizard dog and the ogre. They have the matching blindness and the shield, and the color combination is really nice. It's a very, very strong piece. But again, it's a finished final render piece right away as your first object, and no process, no clue how you got there, no story, no description, no idea of how or why you're using it. It's just a piece of artwork.
Yeah, again, keeping in mind that the whole point of concept art is to, tell a story. You're explaining a character, especially, so it's maybe not as important with, it is important, but it's not as important with like a humanoid character, because that's a lot easier for us to just kind of like generically understand. Whereas like, I want to know why you did these pieces. Like, what were they for? What was the inspiration? Like, even if it was just personal work, like having a little blurb about, this is a crustacean world, where we look at crustacean type things. Like, I don't know, tell me why you did this, right? Like, I want to understand that you didn't just like start messing around in a program and then liked how something turned out and then just pushed it. Like, I want to know that you had intention.
That can also be a weakness. Is a really good point she's bringing up, is that using ZBrush, you can have a really fun time sculpting and making shapes, and then execute really well on top of them. But it becomes a weakness in a portfolio if you're doing that too much, or that's just all you're demonstrating inside of a piece, because it does look like you were just kind of exploring and messing around, and then you found something really cool that you executed really well. Like, that's neat, and that's great and everything. Maybe 1 or 2 of those, with some more elaboration is good. But, your creature section is entirely that. It's just these finished, highly done, quite possibly on as some sort of modeling software. If not, then kudos on you for making it look that good.
Yeah.
But it altogether, when it comes across in this way, it almost looks like you're just focusing too much on just this one thing, and we need to see more especially just for that section.
Just one other little nitpicky thing in the main page. I don't understand why all of your titles are not like capitalized.
Oh yeah.
So some of the titles are all lowercase, mech is all uppercase, and I'm not really sure why. And then the other ones are like, I don't know. Again, it's just a little thing that when you present this to a visual person, that's something that they're going to notice right away, and it tells me, oh, well, there's not so much attention to detail here, and you're not really thinking about, how you're presenting it.
It's a key to all artists everywhere, is that we tend to kind of dismiss certain things rather than just thinking the art will sell for us. So if you make spelling mistakes, grammatical mistakes, or even not capitalize, or even continue with repeating design concepts like making sure that everything's capitalized. If your titles are all capitalized, then they should all be capitalized, right? Yeah. And those kind of themes do come across, and showing that you're not paying attention to that, can lose you a job in a moment, no matter how good you are. So the other issue I have with your sections in your website are your images are far too big. Like, they don't fit into the browser no matter what I do. And then I know that if you click on them, you get a smaller one that fits, but you shouldn't be complicating the usage. Like, an employer is just going to be skimming through these. He's going through, or he or she, them, are going through hundreds of these, right? They're looking at everyone's work. They're not looking to click through anything. They just want to see it, see if you're good enough, and then register that, put it into the bin of an almost got in, and move along. You know, they're just too big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking at, what's the section? This is the characters section.
Yeah.
So the characters section, again, you start off with this really highly rendered image, and then after that you have kind of these more sort of sketchy looking images. Mm-hmm. And in comparison, because it's one right after the other, it makes it feel like the other pieces are not finished, or that you aren't as comfortable painting. That would be my impression from your work, is that you're not as comfortable just painting on a canvas, digital canvas or whatever. Mm-hmm. It looks like you are a lot more comfortable with overpainting, which, that's totally fine. But then if that's what you are comfortable with and you want to pursue, then don't put this kind of stuff in, or else you need to really up your game on your rendering and your painting.
Yeah, it's important to demonstrate your skills in all categories. You can't focus in on one thing. And that's something that happens here for sure. Like, your paint overs that appear to be on top of some sort of render or model, like your Mothman at the top, which is a great piece.
Yeah.
But then you switch over to these painting pieces, and it's clear that your knowledge of anatomy, knowledge of value, knowledge of painting isn't quite as strong as your sculpting and rendering abilities when it comes down to the modeling, right? And when you're in the job, like, just because you're good at one thing, just because you're good at doing the modeling and the rendering and the paint overs, doesn't mean that that's what they're going to hire you to do and just do that. They're going to want you to be able to paint quickly on the spot. They're going to want to know that if you sit you down in a boardroom and you need to whip out something, that it's going to look correct and it's going to demonstrate the idea. Can you show off the idea fast enough? Can you iterate fast enough, right? You can get pretty fast at rendering on top of these models, but it's still much more time consuming than quickly passing out a value pass on a character and trying to demonstrate what this person who's a witch looks like, or, mm-hmm. And then Tara's also right, like, in contrast, because the skill level is different on two different sides, demonstrating them together makes you suddenly appear like you have a weakness, one that's very apparent, right? Instead of breaking it up. My advice for yourself is just keep practicing. There's no lack of ability, talent, or skill here. There's definitely the capacity for you to take your painting much further. Life drawing, always a key to good anatomy, and mastering your anatomy takes time and just practice. It's not a problem, but just keep doing it. You have the capacity to keep going further. But I would say that if you're trying for a job right now and you want to get in, I think maybe you should refine your portfolio to focus in on what your current strengths are and get those ones up before you start presenting your paintings.
Yeah, I agree.
And my only other little nitpick is some of these don't look like they're quite in the proper resolution, and or it's your painting that's making them blurry. Certain parts are standing out above others. In particular is, I'm looking currently at the image of your
sort of Spartan soldiery
Aztec knight soldier.
Yeah.
It's a great design, and
yeah.
I like the design and I like the idea. But
samurai something.
Yeah, something about the colors, something about how you've done the lighting. It comes off blurry and almost like as if it's pixelated. I feel like I can see pixels in it.
Yeah. And I can see that you took like a photo and you used like a reference image of a person, but you've actually used the photo underneath your paintings, and then that also just it sort of cements that like difference between the pieces that you painted, and then like especially in the hands, like the hands are the most apparent part problem with that like sort of juxtaposition is that it's really showing that your painting skills aren't as crisp as the photorealism that's in the image.
There's nothing wrong with photo bashing and paintovers,
no.
But if it shows that you're doing it, and believe me, with enough art directors out there, or art directors have had enough experience with this to spot it from a mile away, that if they do spot it, it means your portfolio's gone, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with using reference. Use reference like mad.
Yes.
I have like 400 pieces of reference open at a time. I have libraries of it.
Yeah.
I toss it in and I do shadow blocking all the time with them in order to get that exact look I'm looking for, and and I just push and pull and massage, and I practice my anatomy so I know what I'm doing is correct. And that's not coming through with this. This is coming through like, I didn't know how to get this pose, so I just took the pose, right? And that'll lose you a job before you ever get a call back. All right, yeah, so Olivia Colden, your artwork is good, but we'll start with your portfolio, which I actually very much like. I have almost nothing wrong to say about your actual construction of your portfolio. Your name is clear and it's right there. The tabs are the right size. They draw me in to want to push and find out more. You have a good tab on the side. It's not too much. It's not too little. It's nice and simple. And it illustrates exactly what it is that we need to do. And that's just to look at your artwork first things first, right? Big key to every artist is that with your portfolio, your artwork should be the first thing you hit, which all of these have been doing, so kudos on all of you.
Mm-hmm.
But this one's done in a nice, clean, crisp, and well-presented way for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I think first impressions for me, when I look at this portfolio, it says to me that you have a large body of work. Perhaps you're a recently graduated student and you're looking to kind of break into the industry. And what really says that to me is that you have concept art, illustration, and design. If you do not want to be a designer, a graphic designer, if you're really looking for a job just in concept art and illustration, then don't put your graphic design in your portfolio. Because it's not your strongest work, and I can tell that it's not really what you want to do. You have a capability to do it, which is perfect and great, and in some situations that's going to help you after you've gotten the job, but it's not going to help you get the job.
For sure.
So I would take that out.
Yeah, I've 100%, like, I feel there's a lack of focus with all the work. Like, what comes up, my eye immediately goes over to the fairy piece, because I'm looking at this as you want to be a concept artist, and that you're looking at doing concept art. But then as my eye moves over all of your pieces, I suddenly get confused, and I'm not sure where you're going. I know that in your letter you wrote to us and said, did you want to be an illustrator and a concept artist? But a refined focus in your work and your portfolio should be tailored to exactly what it is you're pursuing. Whether that means you make a second portfolio specifically for your graphic design or specifically for your illustration, maybe that's the best thing to do. An all-in-wonder website probably won't win you the job because they feel like you don't contain the focus you need in order to do it. Your skills go everywhere, or you don't know where you want to go, right? And that can be damaging. But that being said, again, like, it's all very strong and all very crisp. The work inside, the way it's presented is nice. The navigation is nice. You do actually show a little bit of breakdown of the works you do. You have descriptions in there. There's a bit of variation inside of some of the styles. Some of it's a little bit more, carefully rendered and done. Some of it's just ideation. Very, very well covered, really nicely presented, and I really, really like that. Again, it's just with that focus. Like, I'm inside your concept art part right now, and while you did do the images for a tough sell, it's almost more of a UX and graphic design presentation because you have the UI on top of it. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't include that as a presentation as part of what the final product was, but you're trying to sell your artwork in the section of concept art. It should be just the artwork. I shouldn't be paying attention to your graphic design. If you're going to have a design section, that should be removed and put into your design section.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And we're just looking at like the Sim Profit piece, which I like the art. The artwork is really nice, but it's I just get really distracted by the video image, and I don't think that it adds anything because the work that you did for the project is already there. And because, I'm not sure, like 100% sure if you did the UI stuff or not. It says that you just did backgrounds and illustrations. But if you didn't do the UI and stuff, then that's not really helping you either. And it's just, it's kind of distracting, covering over your work. So I wouldn't put it in. If you want to have a link to this video, if somebody for some reason wants to look at it, that's totally cool. If I'm like really interested in looking at what this sim profit thing is and all that, then I will, go and look at that. But as what it is right now, it's distracting.
Yeah, including a face front right away is, it's a good point. I really like the idea of putting a link in, so I would just remove the video embedded in there, put it down to a link and say you can explore and see what this sim profit game was, and this is what the work was. Direct them to where the game is hosted elsewhere. Again, like you're in your concept art section, so refine it down to just your concept art. Now, once you remove that and only have a link, you'll only have one piece on this page, which isn't good. You should have some more exploration of that. And since you did this for a client or in a project setting, you probably had ideation and progress work hopefully still saved somewhere. So just include that instead. And then show, even if you want a screen grab of like the final piece at the end, just make it about the artwork instead and just provide a link. Because this video, when I come up to it, the first thing I thought was like, oh my god, she did all of this. I'm like excited, and then I look down and suddenly I see that there's a chance that you didn't. Did you not? Did you? There's not enough description. I don't know what the project is. There's no link to where it came from. So then I suddenly get confused and I just dismiss the piece. And a lot of other employers will probably do something along the same. And I think that's it for her portfolio. All right.
Overall, a really beautiful work. Your work is very nice.
Yeah. There's actually nothing technically wrong with what you're doing. All you need is just some practice and time, and you'll just keep going further. But you have the foundations to do what you need to do. It's just execution, getting used to presenting professionally and properly within, and giving yourself a focus. Pick it out what it is that you want to do. And it's a really hard thing to do, and I'm not expecting you to do it today. You got to figure out what it is you want to do with your career specifically. But I would say that the key is that you have to pick out the one thing that it is you want to do, and then start pursuing only that with a fiery passion. Work harder than everyone else. Keep getting better. Show it off all the time. Don't let anyone tell you it's not a job you can do, or it's not something you can work for, or, oh, you're an artist, you're starving all the time. Like, just ignore all of it and work really hard on getting to your goal, and just show that that's the only thing you can do is getting your goal achieved. It'll win you a job before anything else. Hard work trumps talent every time. So up next is Jens Fielder. Again, sorry for screwing up your name, Jens. But we'll start off with just critiquing your actual full portfolio, which is a nice presentation and is a really good start. However, it took a long time to load because you have such a massive image that we hit on right away. I would just size that down a bit. Like, it's nice. I love the impact. I like the color. I like the contrast. I like the white with the blue. It's nice. Great setup. Right tabs. Everything's great. Contact information is right there in my face. Images. A nice image, if not slightly controversial.
I'll talk about that in a second.
There you go. And I think that that's great, but if you just shrunk it down so it wasn't such a heavy image when I hit, so I wouldn't have to spend so much time getting to your page, that would make a nice improvement.
I have a small sort of issue with the image that you chose for this big, beautiful background for when you first get to the website. This is the first thing that people see when they click on your website. And if you're going to use this giant piece, you want to expect people to take some time and look at it and enjoy the details and all of those kinds of things. And far be it from me to have uncomfortable moments with nudity. But if you are in a studio environment or a workplace environment, like there are people who are going to feel uncomfortable being presented with bare breasts as like this giant high-res image as the first thing that you see. So you have to think a little bit about that. I mean, I know we're in a modern world and most people, it doesn't matter, but you still have to consider like the general public. And the problem is it's just not, it's not professional. And again, you can have this image in your portfolio and that's great. And people can see it at a smaller size because you do have great little thumbnails and stuff all through your portfolio. And then somebody can choose whether or not to, make it a giant nipple or not.
You can even just crop the image itself.
Absolutely.
Like when you shrink it down and you want to make it less huge when we hit the page and just crop it right above the nipple, focus in on the face and just crop it differently.
Yeah.
Make the whole banner that you hit in the start smaller. Then that would just solve the issue and no one would say anything. They'd just be like, ooh, pretty.
Yeah, and then I can enjoy looking at all of the details and not feel like I need to like quickly, not safe for work, scroll through it. Yeah. So that's just a piece of advice.
And it's very true. The last thing you want to do is have a creative director that you're applying to suddenly just trying to scroll away really fast because they feel awkward.
Uncomfortable.
Who knows where they're sitting when it happens, and then they have to answer questions they don't want to answer. So, just for a hit page, I would fix that. My only other thing too is, while it's neat that this image scrolls around when you move your
parallax stuff.
It's really neat. But again, as much as this stuff is cool and I love this stuff and it's a great show of some sort of technical expertise on you, unfortunately, when it comes down to your art portfolio, this is actually going to cause some detriment because this person is going to start fiddling around with this and be like, down, up, go, what? Like, it's the animations and fun, flingy things is actually more of a detriment than an actual nice ad. If you want to include that cool parallax thing in the actual piece in your portfolio further down when they get in, I could actually see that being kind of neat because it's kind of cool to actually move around and almost feel like I'm looking around behind the character. But as what I hit up front, probably not. So again, solid image, slightly above the nipple, shrink everything down, and I think you've got a great opening page. All right, moving on to the presentation of your actual work. Again, excellently done. Nothing truly wrong here with the actual presentation. Thumbnails are the right size. It's an easy scroll through. My biggest comment is actually on the content. I know you want to be a freelance creature and character artist, and that's great, and you can totally make that your job one day. But even the most experienced and full-on character and creature artists have to do environments and backgrounds and other things. If you show that you're inflexible, in your work, then they're not going to want to hire you because they want to know that if their environment artist is out for a day or they need to hear from you about something about an environment, they know they can rely on you for any skill that they need, right? If you're in a smaller studio, there's no such thing as one job. You have every job, every single art job you can have. I mean, I myself have been the entire art team. I think Tara is the whole art team. Or, well, actually, I think it's a larger art team now. But,
we have a larger team now.
In certain jobs I've had to do the whole thing, and I've had to pull on skills that I did know, and I'm sure you know, because you've got the talent and skill and capacity that I know you've got more than just in characters in you. And it doesn't have to be a primary thing in your portfolio. It's just add a little bit in so we can get that demonstration. Know that there's more beyond it, right? And I think that's pretty much it for the presentation. As for the work, I don't really have anything negative to say about it. So I think it's just really positive on great ideas, nice execution. You certainly seem to have your proportions and anatomy down.
Really great focal point. Your silhouettes are strong.
Lighting is good.
Yep.
So I really don't think there's much to improve in that sense. I think it really would be the weakness in those images is actually in your presentation. And that would be that you toss them all onto foggy backgrounds. That also don't create enough contrast with the image that they're on. like as a strong example would be your. I'm trying to figure out what to call this thing. Your.
It's like a alien octopus thing with like a dome head.
It's
which
really
is super cool, and I love it.
Yeah.
Except that all of those really awesome shapes and details in the silhouette are being totally like murked out with, you know, all of that background stuff. Like there's not enough contrast going on between the background and your image.
Like the colors are also all the same, so it just becomes kind of like a muddy overtone. And I think like it's good you have this blue light coming out below it that's suddenly creating this contrast to the rest. If you just expanded that so that like it was some sort of glow coming off, or maybe a little more lights on the actual creature, whatever it is to just create that, the lightning bolt in the background, it doesn't matter. Just something to create a blue contrast and that change in color so the character actually pops out, since that's what you're exposing. It's like, this is my character design, this is how awesome it is. You know, that would make a difference in your work. I mean, this repeats in a lot of pieces. It repeats in your soldier, it repeats in some of your mech stuff, or your, you know, powered armor suits. You know, like, but when it comes to one example where you are doing an amazing job of creating that contrast is in your goblin. Yeah, it looks like a goblin, a bit inspired by maybe Laurel D. Austin. It's a great piece because you have this awesome, strong source of lighting, the green face. You know, there's an environment going on. Yeah,
you have the backlighting. Yeah. You have, you know, it looks like they're part of a larger world, like an environment. Like I can feel like I sort of understand who this person is a little bit more. Goblin or whatever, not necessarily a person.
Green creature of coolness.
Yeah. So I would say that this is one of your stronger pieces, which is interesting because it's very different from the rest of your work as well. So it kind of stands out a little bit more. So maybe that's something that you want to think about, is sort of dispersing your more colorful pieces further throughout your portfolio, as opposed to kind of bundling them all together to just sort of break up the gray a little bit, add a little bit more visual interest.
I mean, we've been talking about adding categories in, and I would say that like you should make this into a character category tab, and then do an environment tab, and then do a sketches tab, and then do maybe a process tab or an exploration tab, just because like altogether this presentation is great, and if I was to go and look at your characters, this is awesome. Right? But I still need to see more. I need to be able to know that you can do more beyond just demonstrating really great profile shots of characters, right?
I want to know how you did this stuff. Like I want to see sort of what your process is, and you know, what you're trying to do with it. Like it's and then that VW van thing at the very bottom, kind of thrown in there. It feels weird to me.
Yeah, it's a smaller image too.
Yeah, and I don't like. Is it a?
It looks like a photo.
Is it a photo? I'm confused by that.
Maybe we should just
if you have more work like this, that's awesome. Make a tab and put a bunch of this kind of work in, because it's also really strong. I don't know if is it a photo, or is it like a 3D render or something?
So this would be another good point, is that if an art director sits down and starts doing this, that's bad.
Yeah.
So you should include some more explanation, like you have your name and apocalyptic VW bus, but you should be like photograph, photo bash, 3D model.
Yeah.
Even if it was just photographic work, it's a really cool shot.
Yeah.
You know, and you can have a miscellaneous section where you just have like my arts, right? And if the art director is interested enough to see how far your artistic skills go, they can click on it. And that's totally cool, because this is a really great, if it's a photograph that you actually like set up this van in, which, I mean, if you actually did that, that's super, super cool.
Yeah. If it's a photo montage, then like this is really well done and seamless, and like kudos to you on photo montaging. Yeah. But like I
don't know why it's here.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with a bit of the theme of the other stuff. Like you have your bear character, you have these gnomes and goblins, and then you have these really dark like monster characters. Then you have what look like almost Mortal Kombat characters. You know, like you have like such a variation, but they clump up together, and it creates these menage of like like your top starts off with very strong characters, but dull backgrounds that all kind of merge together and become one. And then suddenly we start hitting more vibrant characters, and they all start getting together, and they become one. So I don't pick out any one particularly strong piece, considering there are a lot of really great pieces in here.
Yeah, really nice work.
And I want to put in as a comment, we were discussing this earlier, we were thinking about the usage of fan art. And that's controversial, I would say, and you might get a different response depending on who you talk to.
Yeah.
But I think Tara and I both agreed that it's okay if it's really well done and very little of it. So this Rocket Raccoon that's included in Yen's portfolio is fine, and I love seeing it in there. So I'm not bothered by it. But it does bring up that point that some portfolios do end up getting washed out inside of fan art.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that, you know, you got to be careful of that. Now, nothing with that in this actual portfolio. But.
Yeah, well, and like Mike said, you know, there's going to be different opinions on that. So just know that, like, if you don't want to get involved in that at all, then don't put it in, or put it in very, very lightly.
Oh, an A+ on putting in a blog. Sorry.
Yeah. It's always fun to see a blog if you're really interested in, like, if you're like, oh, this artist is really great, like, I'm going to go to the blog. But then if you do have a blog, make sure that you're updating it regularly.
If you leave it empty and you have it included on your website and someone sees that, no matter who it is.
Yeah, I've seen that before too.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
you just look like a lazy boy.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't, make sure to constantly update your work no matter what you do. And it's actually a really good idea, and that's some really good professional advice. Which I think we'll kind of cover now, is when you're doing this with your portfolio is your first handshake, right? But the online environment is very different. It's a universe that you have to use to constantly update and pitch and show your progress. If you look stagnant online, then you look like a stagnant artist, right? If your artwork hasn't updated the last 2 times you've applied to a job at the same location, and they could be a year apart, let's say, and your portfolio hasn't changed, they won't not remember you, or maybe they won't, but even if they do, like they can see that there's no change and you look stagnant. So updating and maintaining artwork, even if it's just a sketch you do randomly on the bus that looks really good, or you have an art class that you go to that you like to share that work, you know, run a Tumblr, run an Instagram, run a blog, run all 3 actually is even better, you know, open up a Facebook page, link everything in, make sure your Twitter is updated, just become a media whore, 24/7 media whore, and you're just like, look at me, right? And just keep showing that you're making changes and progress. That'll get you more attention, more work, more jobs, and get you more connected with people than you spending 24 to 48 hours rendering like mad. You know, terrified if that piece will turn out, tossing it out, doing another one, eventually making one really good piece, putting that up and hoping it gets enough attention, you know.
Yeah, and it'll also, that's the flip side of that is that it'll also expose you more regularly to more other artists and seeing other people's work and sort of not sort of stagnating in your own little corner of the world. You know, you're seeing what other people are doing, you know, and you're always going to be learning more the more that you do that. So there's like kind of an upside to being online and active, is that you are going to see other things as well. So it's not just about your work all the time.
Yeah, and participating in as many different things as possible, just all that does is create basically positive press.
Yeah.
You know? And that's all you're really looking for is, can you get a little bit of attention? And as soon as you do, someone will. So for some critiques on your actual work, Carlos, we're going to take a look at your piece of a werewolf that looks like it's in the middle of a war, possibly?
The Vikings versus Saxons cover.
Nice, I didn't even get the Saxons.
Yeah.
Now, it's not like a bad piece by any means, but this piece does actually demonstrate a lot of the weaknesses that do come through with your artwork. And the biggest one is over texture and so much going on. It's baffling and dwarfing. You have so many things happening inside of your image that there is no focal point, and I don't pay attention.
Yeah, I have a hard time letting my eye kind of rest on anything, and actually, what it rests on the most is the flames on the torches, which is not really, I think, supposed to be the focal point of this image. I think the thing we're supposed to be looking at the most is that action with the werewolf, kind of attacking and jumping out towards the people around him. And so, you have this kind of muddy color palette that flattens everything. You don't have a sense of like, there's a depth, a foreground, an established foreground, middle ground, background, like that's only being established through size variation. And even there doesn't quite feel totally convincing either.
No. I mean, the color difference issue comes up over this whole thing. Like, you have at the top that falls into basically your yellows and your browns and maybe a little bit of reds, but like it's almost just like monotone. And then your bottom is hit with this blue, which is correct. You're creating this contrast, but the contrast isn't enough. It's like you're too afraid to pull and push the two really, really hard to do that. And then you're so worried about the details everywhere in your image because you feel like if you don't render it all out really carefully that it won't look good. That as long as your eye is following through the image directly to your focal point, which I would think would be the werewolf's face, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where my eye should just like gravitate to right away, and the rest of it is going to get filled in with my eye's imagination. You'll be surprised about how much someone's eye will fill in on its own.
What I'm assuming is the focal point should be kind of this. This is the key action right here. This is your protagonist or antagonist, I guess, and this is like the person who the action is being directed at. So this is where my eye should be looking all the time, and then kind of like moving around through here, and then coming back to the werewolf and this guy. And so what we can do in order to make this better is just by, even something to do with like color, having the rest of this stuff a little bit more blue, because we have these sort of contrasting colors, add in a little bit more of that haze, to just kind of, push it back a little bit from the focal point. And then one other trick is, and this is something that you could use really well in this design, is rather than having your flames, I'm just going to grab a different, rather than have your flames kind of heading off of the page into this area of the design that's not really doing anything, if you were to have your flames kind of all sort of bending in this direction, it would help to create these sort of visual arrows that point towards, again, this is your focal point, this is what you want to push, everything else is kind of just additional information that we don't really want to be looking at for too long. So I think the sizing and the placement of everything is actually pretty good, but we need to verify what the focal point is and really push that.
And again, cut back on the amount of texture and detail and fuzz and just the amount of distraction that's happening inside of the image is just too much. I mean, like, as a positive towards the image, though, it's a really great idea. I like this werewolf and the charging in front of like these two wars. I mean, it tells a story to me. Perhaps he's a two warring side. Maybe he's an actual monster that's on the opposing enemy team, or like there's just so much going on here that I'd like, right? And it's this giant anamorphous monster. Maybe it's just tearing its way through the middle of the two. Who knows, right? So like it's a great image. It's just so overwhelmed by so many other distracting elements that it's not like showing off its potential. The potential of the skills that you already have and are showing off in many other different aspects, but just not focusing them down into the single image that you're using.
Yeah. So don't be afraid of kind of playing around with contrast. Sorry. Don't be afraid of playing around a little bit with sort of some contrasting colors and things like that, to add sort of some depth. You can see already that this image becomes a lot more focused in this area when you kind of sort of give a little bit more section to your design.
And you can already see as well that, like, by removing some of the multitudes of colors that bled through in that area down at the bottom and making it almost monochrome for those guys at the bottom, they become like this mash of people, and it becomes like this swarm of the other army without me spending too much time looking at specific faces, looking at little pieces. It's just my eye tells me that there's a bunch of people down there, you know, about to charge, and that's good. And then my eye goes straight up to what's highly rendered and what should be the focal point, and that's your werewolf.
Yep. Cool.
All right. All right. So for your image that we actually really did like is the straight shot of pretty much the same werewolf, but, you know, for lack of a less harsh way of putting it, done correctly.
Yeah.
And it's a really great shot because it's got great depth, great perspective, excuse me, really great focus. Lighting is really good on it, despite the fact that, you know, the anatomy is actually off. It's weird off. It's kind of cool. Like, it shouldn't make sense, but it does. You know, there's a really just a great sense of atmosphere to it. I mean, I would still say, again, too much texture, and it's just too busy, and you need to start simplifying, getting away from so much texture. But all together with the environment in the background, the lighting and the color and the difference, like in the contrast, it's a very strong, very well executed image.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this one to me seems like you've reined back a little bit on like the amount of details. Like in the foreground, you have kind of these little hazy areas and things that sort of just help to push the focal point, as opposed to having, like, you know, a too much information kind of situation. So.
As part of another comment on some of your content of your work, as we'll probably bring up again, is there's a very large amount of fan artwork in your portfolio, which it can be very detrimental considering the amount. You know, it's not a bad thing to have some pieces really well executed, and you have lots of really great executed pieces in your of fan art in your portfolio, but there's too much. Like, if it's not your original IP and you're filling your entire content with that, you don't show off your creativity or your ideas.
Right, yeah. So to me, it would say that you don't want to spend the time thinking about your characters. You just want to go ahead and start rendering right away. And that is not what a concept artist's job is. A concept artist's job is to produce ideas and to develop concepts and to develop characters and justification for your choices in those characters. And that's all the work that we're not seeing when you just create fan art. Again, there's nothing wrong with fan art if it's a well-executed piece, but there is a wealth of it in your portfolio, and I really want to be able to see more of your thinking.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've got the skill and the capacity to do this. You've got extraordinary talent with a lot of great ideas, and the execution can go really far. Like, there's the potential of pushing this much further can be really quite impressive, but it's not showing off creativity. It's not showing off inventiveness. You know, if you have too much fan art or too much of basically other people's ideas in your work, right? And that's basically the biggest, weakest link in your whole portfolio. Is it's not in a skill set, it's not in the knowledge, it's not in a lack of ability to do artwork, it's not in anything you're doing technically wrong. It's just that you're presenting the wrong image by throwing so much fan art, by throwing so much texture and so much detail and so many images, and it's a barrage from your portfolio. And if you could tone that back and making it simpler and cleaner, I would think it would make your portfolio pretty much perfect. So that's it for Mr. Carlos. So this piece we're looking at right now is a piece we talked about before, and that's your ogre and his hound.
Mole dog.
It's an amazing idea, and I love the creation of this. I love the story it tells. Like, he's actually kind of like touching him gently and like kind of like caressing him, like, good boy. So like, there's a whole thing there. I love it. The goofy smile that's in there, despite all of the weird scaly bits, and the fact that they both kind of look blind, and maybe they come from some sort of same subset of species, and they're bonded together. Like, great story there. The simple armor and the straps looks great. Again, maybe a bit much on the texture, despite the fact that this is looking like it comes off of a model first. But I think it's just a little bit too much of the grainy texture inside of all of it. But other than that, I actually don't really have much of a complaint here. I think it's a pretty well executed image.
Yeah, the lighting on the shields and stuff really pulls out because you have very minimal clothing details on your character design, that like having the lighting effects really sort of pop out the super cool designs and texture of the shield and the breastplate and that kind of that part of it. That's a really great like highlight thing. I think the one place where it sort of starts to fall apart a little bit for me is on the head of the standing character, the man thing. Because it gets a little bit lost in and maybe that's where I agree with Mike on kind of too much texture happening with those scales and stuff, because the head sort of starts to get lost. And I have the feeling that head is really cool, but I can't really focus on it or see it very well. Whereas like the head on the dog character is like, really well lit, and its silhouette pops out from the sort of dark background behind it and everything like that. That works really well for me. And the head on the humanoid character gets a little bit lost. So, and
the cropping and proportions all correct.
Yeah.
The image just totally captures your eye. It's really well executed in that sense. I don't think there's much to say as a piece on its own that would be negative for myself. I mean, the only negative I would say is that, again, I really want to see how you got here, because like the idea is so kind of cute and fun, but gory and weird, and it kind of reminds me of that director who does weird, scary stuff all the time.
I'm so terrible at remembering names.
Del Toro.
Yes.
Guillermo del Toro. Like, it gives me a reminder of that kind of work, which is an excellent inspiration, and I would totally ride with that. So, nice piece.
Okay, so this image, this kind of ties into our general comments about some of your painting, is that it feels a little bit weaker than some of your other rendering. So things like the kind of awkward anatomy in the shoulders here. The fact that it looks like, and I don't know if this is the case, but it looks like you have just drawn a half of a man right about here, and you just sort of mirrored it. It cuts down all the dynamicism of this pose. The fact that he's like got these giant, spiky ball chain things, and he's gonna whip something around, and like, that seems like a very action-based image. And because you've kind of, as soon as you do a reflection in this way, it just kills all of the movement in your design. So you can start it that way, but then you kind of have to rework things as you work up the image. Don't keep it in such a way that it looks really mirrored. And the same thing with his face. His face is very, split straight down the middle, mirrored. And the fact that like this whole thing it feels very like split down the center, super symmetrical with like both of these, and they're, they look like they're the same ones that you've just kind of changed a bit of the lighting on. It serves to just sort of deaden the design a little bit.
Straight head-on shots, almost, I wouldn't say 100% of the time, but the majority of the time don't work. Like, you should be trying to find some way of making the pose more dynamic. It's called pushing the pose. Like, this pose doesn't have to not work, but if he was slightly more twisted back, and his arms were, like, showing the stress of holding these two really heavy things up, and one was, like, slightly lower down, and the other one was harder, and it was like he was, like, pulling really hard to just get these up, and he's about to swing them, and he's like got his knees bent, to like try and show the weight that's coming through. Like, that would change the image entirely. And then on top of that, the anatomy on it suddenly breaks, right? Because you don't have that underlying model to be able to like tell whether or not your anatomy is correct. He's got
this kind of pelvis that's turned a little bit this way, but you don't really see any of that turn happening in the torso. So this looks just disconnected here.
His shins are too long, or sorry, his thighs are too long, and he's almost got no shin.
Yeah. And this is very flat foot. You would have a little bit more curve happening, more like that, to give a little bit more description to, sort of the way that the foot is pushed onto the ground without it being just like a flat line like that. So these are all things that sort of make the design feel sort of wonky. And then also, having, spending a lot of time sort of rendering all of these muscles and everything is great. But then having this kind of hair that looks a little bit more cartoony and, it just, and then you have this sort of very, very rendered sort of realistic looking chain in here. It feels a little bit mishmashy. And also, these medallion things are like, again, straight on shots when it should be following the curve of the belt, following the curve of this chest piece. I don't know, Mike, if you have anything else you want to add?
Well, there's nothing entirely wrong with your design choice, that's for sure. Like, the character itself, while not extremely exciting, there's technically nothing wrong with him. Like, you don't have bad design decisions. The skin color is great. The purple is not a bad choice. Like, there's technically nothing incorrect with like your technique, right? It comes across as this weird show in the rest of your work when it comes down to just your painting work that comes across from your 3D model work, is this kind of missing skill set in life drawing and anatomy, proportion, perspective, right? If you have a model that's making the perspective for you before you paint on top of it, it just gets so easy. And it's not a bad thing to do. As a matter of fact, in the job, if that's a skill you can use to make yourself churn out artwork twice as fast, an employer is going to love that. However, it's not going to ever be as good as it can be if you don't have your fundamentals down. So this piece just demonstrates how many of the fundamentals are kind of missing in your current skill set. And I think that including them, it's just like, is damaging, but you're just so not far off from, like, as you can see what Tara's doing here, just pushing it a little bit further. I mean,
obviously this looks a little bit wonky, but if you think about it in terms of like positioning and sort of a little bit more movement in the piece and things like that, you get a little bit more variety in the arms.
If you have the original file with him as a separate layer, which I hope that's what you work as, because people who think working on one layer is great, I sometimes think they don't have a job. Because you have to go back and edit sometimes, actually every time. But if he's on a separate layer, you should play around with using like the Puppet Warp and the Liquify tools in Photoshop. And to transform, all sorts of the other tools to use to try and push the pose. Find the pose that really pushes it along, right? And then try and find some references of similar life drawing models or whatever, poses in the same sense. See how someone else's muscles line up and work correctly, and then you can follow along and get it dynamic, get it pushed, get that real like raw look that you're probably looking for out of this image, rather than that guy who's standing there just kind of holding balls.
It's a little awkward to think of it that way, but yeah, totally.
All right, so moving on to Olivia's artwork and picking out a good piece. We picked out your fairies as just one of your good pieces. I think as a general statement beforehand, I don't think there's anything strong or anything particularly weak about your work. It's all pretty much strong. It's literally just practice for you from this point on, and repetition and pushing yourself into doing more really creative and interesting ideas with your work, and really just like expanding just a little bit further, which is just time and getting a little bit fearless with your work. But that being said, for my favorite piece is definitely the fairy piece, just simply because you're showing ideation. It's also kind of nice and rough. and like I can see style behind it. I can see like your thought process behind it. It's adorable too as a design. Like it's this like frumpy, fat blue fairy, like almost from Cinderella, but like this is like her at the end. Like it's a great piece. I have like almost nothing bad to say about it, and I think it's a great like portfolio piece. I think employers will really like seeing that kind of iteration and the ideation behind it. I like the use of your values. I like the use of the color. Really nothing bad to say. I just think that the only thing bad about it is that you just need time, and as you go, you'll get better.
Yeah, I totally agree. One tiny little sort of nitpicky thing is that on the second top right fairy, the arm looks weird. It looks very stumpy compared to all the other arms, and it doesn't really bother me that much in the reference of like, this is just concept art that was probably quickly put together. But if I had to pick one thing, because I always have to pick one thing, that's kind of the one thing that's gonna sort of bother me a little bit. But other than that, like I love the really painterly feel of it. It doesn't feel like you've spent hours and hours like rendering an eyeball or anything like that. You got to the point, you're communicating the outfits and the designs of the character without really agonizing over every tiny little detail.
I mean, just kind of as we're playing fair, I would say like the piece we were going to put on is like your weak piece, which technically you don't have. You have it's a very odd skill set for you because your artwork, Olivia, it seems to just kind of coast at one level. Like you're at like 65% all the way through, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But like you can go so much further. And the piece you did for the one that included the video, I feel it's a good piece. Again, it's like 65, 75% for sure. But your work is missing some pizzazz, some pop, something that's just going to really push it out. You look at other concept artists and some of the big ones, and their work really draws on like dynamic lighting, dynamic pose, dynamic figure, great perspective. And while this picture probably was designed specifically for a project in mind that had certain like restrictions for you, for sure. I just think of this like if we remove everything and you had it, I think this could have gone a lot further and been just 25% more with a little bit more execution, some more dynamic lighting, a little bit more progression in the perspective as the image faded into the background. Like one of those mountains is actually standing just a little bit too harshly against the background when it really should still have some of the fog that's hit some of the others. And your perspective is correct, but at the same time it's scaling upwards, it's scaling back, and it could have been way more dynamic if it was like scaling maybe directly up a hill or more dynamically back and down, right? Like there's just really pushing your work to go into a really dynamic way is I think going to really push your skills really far. And I think from now on as you go, I think what you should be doing every time is looking at dynamic angles and dynamic colors and lighting. One of my favorite inspirations for that is Kekai Kotaki, if I'm even pronouncing his name correctly, but I think that's correct. But he's a master of really strong dynamic angles and powerful color. And his artwork, again, is very painterly, very similar to like something that you come across in your work. But it's just these angles and these images that have like this grand size to them and this tiny little character, and it's just so well executed. I really think you can push yourself in that direction and you'll just soar much further.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And to add on to that a little bit, I think what it is that we're all seeing here is that, you have very beautiful control over your paint strokes, that I want to see you play a little bit more with your paint strokes. Like, have some unfinished edges and have some sort of, a little bit more wispiness at times and things like that to help sort of create the focal point and to really like push those really beautifully rendered faces and everything that you have. That's something that I would want to sort of challenge you to try.
For sure. Good work.
Yeah. Okay, so we had to pick one image from your portfolio that probably wasn't your strongest, and this is the one. By no means is it a terrible image, but there are some things that you could work on to sort of help it be a little bit more successful, more dramatic, because it is a very dramatic close-up shot. So I think first thing, I think the cropping is a little bit awkward. So the fact that you're sort of cropping off right at the side of the head, you want to either crop in like super close or a little bit further out. But like the fact that you're cropped kind of right on the edge of where the head would end, it just feels pinched. So I would sort of zoom out a little bit more because it would give a little bit more context to your image. And then in terms of just your technique of dealing with, an extreme, this is not an easy thing to do by any means, like creating these kind of close-up renders of fur. The inclination is to get in there and get all these fine details and draw them all in each individual sort of line, and I'm going to draw each thing, and you've dealt with it in a pretty good way, but what ends up happening when you draw each individual line is that you end up like looking at each individual line.
You lose a lot of the value inside of it, right? Like you keep doing this and you keep rendering it, and how are you going to adjust the values? And that's the biggest weakness in this, is that because you spend so much time on so much detail inside of this thing and trying to get it rendered out correct, probably too early in the process of the image, that the values don't communicate the appropriate shape inside of his image. So like his eyes are too sunken, the nose doesn't protrude forward enough, the bottom of his snout and where his mouth is should be coming more forward, and the biggest one is that his forehead looks like it's shrunk inside of his brain. Yeah,
the forehead is odd. And I understand like you were trying to push the nose out and then push the head back a bit, but the fact that like, you have this place here where there's this sort of back shine, it actually makes this feel much less rounded. And then also, so if we can sort of give him a little bit more up here. And then also, when you go just kind of paint out some of that detail, and this is not how I would do it.
Be a little more careful about it.
Yeah, and I would probably use like a nice textured brush to kind of give the illusion of those hairlines without actually having every individual hair in here. Maybe that's something that you could sort of play around with, is
and as you can already see, like the figure and the shape of the face is already starting to point more like he's gotten a snout now rather than something that seems to be reclining in, right? Like even part of the darkening is like even on the bottom of the snout, there's a difference in value now that's strong enough that I'm focusing directly in on his brow and his nose, and everything else is kind of falling to the wayside, right?
Yeah, and I think just one other thing that's bothering me about the nose is the fact that there's this weird, very harsh, cross-hatched highlight area on his nose, which actually flattens the nose more than gives it depth. So if you can just sort of smooth that out a little bit, again, with another sort of more textured brush to kind of give the illusion of, the little dimples and things on a nose as opposed to, these kind of crosshatchy lines, would help sort of push everything. And now everything can kind of focus on the eyes and sort of the really jutting forward of this head.
One thing I would also be careful of with this image that's coming across, and I kind of saw it in a few of the others, especially in the faces, is like the eye on the right-hand side. You have a correct shadow underneath the eye that creates the eye feeling like it's sinking into a socket, but the eye on the left-hand side does not have that shadow quite as strong, and the eye looks like it's sitting there like a teddy bear's eye, like sits on top of like the fur of a teddy bear, right? So like creating the proper depth to make sure that those eyes look like they're folding into the sockets and like all the pieces kind of sink in instead of they feel like they're flat and hitting on top. that'll make a big difference in this image and also in many of your others. But other than that, your work is really strong, and you've definitely got an eye for it. I would just say, like, hold back a bit sometimes and start exploring things that scare you. Yeah, I mean, we're really excited also to be doing more of these and kind of connecting with you guys more in much more personal ways. Pens and Pixels is forming up to offer a lot more content, which you can keep updated on our Facebook page and our Twitter. And on our website, subscribe to the RSS feed on our website for the blog. Do all those things. And then, of course, with this video as well, like, share, subscribe, comment below if you have any questions about artwork that you want to have us, me or Tara answer. We'll be happy to answer them in the comments below. We're happy to participate and we're happy to give feedback because that's like the key to growing as an artist is getting really good, strong feedback. And I think the last thing I'm going to say is, for all of you out there who are looking to become professional artists, you totally can be. There's nothing stopping you. It's just time, practice, repetition, and learning, and you'll be doing that for the rest of your life.
Yep.
All right, guys, have a good time, and we'll see you later.